everybody, welcome to another episode of Shooting the Shift. This week, Milton's not with us because he's off doing a celebratory thing or something. We've got Captain Echo back in his horrible room of bouncy noises.
There's nothing in the room, I can't help it.
And Bryn, as always, has turned up this week. Successful. Bryn, I think it's you and me are the only two on every episode appearance at the moment.
That's because I've got nothing better to do once work closes on a Friday night. Also, welcome to Shooting the Shift, where this week we're all wearing hats indoors.
Well, I'm wearing it for advertising. I think if Matt didn't have his cap so far up, he'd be wearing it for advertising. And you've got your logo on the wrong way round.
I'm only wearing mine because it's real windy outside, and I went outside and it has done terrible things to the mullet.
Yeah, that's why we all wear hats. Just the weather.
So this week's kind of a bit of a weird one. We've got a few things that we've wanted to talk about for a while, but in their own right, they wouldn't have made a full episode, and we've been putting out like 15-minute podcasts, which you don't want when you're working. Because I've apparently discovered that this is some people's favourite thing to listen to during the week while they're at work.
You're insane.
I'm not.
Each their own. Not judging.
Yeah. I'm just concerned that we might be responsible for some people being made redundant at some point. So there's a few things going on. I think the first one, that the whole thing kind of sits into the sustainability of cars in the UK, basically, and older cars and how they kind of relate to what we're all about. So the absolute first thing is summer 2021, regular fuel becomes E10.
Is it summer? I thought it was September.
That's what the government website says, mate.
Okay, well, if the government
they
says
might have changed.
Summer, it'll be 2025. So we've got ages, guys. Don't worry. Postpone the podcast for 4 years.
So everybody's kind of in themselves, basically, because it's bad for your engine, which Bryn will no doubt tell us that we're all wrong about in a minute. It is bad for your fuel lines.
It depends on your fuel, the age of the fuel lines.
It also depends on the fuel lines you're using. Like, it's a prime excuse to upgrade your fuel lines.
Well,
ready for E85.
So this is my thing. So obviously I'm building the RX-7 at the moment. My ultimate goal was buy hose that's suitable for E85 and fit that regardless. And then if I want to make the choice to go to ethanol, like fully E85 at some point, I'll just throw that in. I don't think that the hoses are any more expensive, but it also means I can then use the leftover hose to replace the tiny bits of fuel line on Nicole's MX-5. And the reality is, if you've got an old car, you will have to change the rubber lines. But on the MX-5, there's a little bit of rubber line at the back where it goes into the actual tank. And then it's all hard line. And then there's a little bit as it goes into the fuel rail at the other end. That's it. It's not a big job.
The problem is the other parts, though, because the ethanol will attack any of this rubber anywhere in the fuel system. If you've got in the fuel tank some parts that might be made out of non-ethanol compliant rubber, you're going to have a problem. The fuel pumps, a lot of old pumps will need replacing. And the big one is things like the fuel pressure regulator on the end of the MX-5 fuel rail. I haven't ever taken one apart, but I'm assuming it's got a rubber diaphragm like a lot of them do, and that will be degraded by the E10. And that's not a cheap one to replace, or it's not a quick one to replace, because I think you'll end up needing to buy an aftermarket fuel pressure regulator and set that up and things like that. So yeah, lines are easy. I mean, I replaced the lines on the MX-5 not long ago, and it is actually not a hard job, and people shouldn't panic. But it's knowing that the other stuff is going to be ethanol compatible. That's your problem.
But the other thing to point,
I've got the other solution to this anyway. Everything I own is an import. And as a result, everything is run on 98 and 99, and I'm not going to be affected by this.
Well, that's well, it brings up 2 points. That one is E10 is not going to degrade it overnight. It's not going to be a quick thing. So if you haven't got around to it, you'll be all right for a little bit, but it'll need doing as soon as possible. And the higher octane fuels, the V-Power, the Tesco 99 Momentum, and whatever other places have got, aren't going to affect you.
Yeah, they have said anywhere that sells 2 grades of fuel, the higher grade of fuel will stay on the lower ethanol, which is good.
Speaking of momentum, actually, I saw a really interesting thing happen and took advantage of it last week when we had to go up for the family thing that's been going on in the background, and that was that Tesco in Stoke had mispriced their momentum by 10 pence a litre.
Nice.
So I filled up the Challenger, which is like 70, 80 quid fill up normally, with 60 quid's worth of momentum.
Nice.
So it was a good day to be driving that thing home. And that's the thing, like, it's not actually, I don't even see the premium fuels as that much more expensive. If you insist on putting Shell in your car, you go to V-Power and it's about 10p more a litre. If
Shell itself is expensive anyway, so
yeah. If you're using supermarket fuel, just go to Tesco and buy momentum. You know, the market force is going to dictate the prices of these. If you suddenly stop buying fuel and you move to premium fuels, they're just going to make more of it. They're fuel companies. They're not electric companies at the end of the day. You know, and they're going to focus on what's going to make them money.
An interesting point about momentum as well. I don't know if it is still the case, but a few years ago, a lot of the tuners out there were saying that the fuels that they preferred were V-Power momentum because they were actually the most consistent fuels for achieving their octane rating. So Tesco momentum, although it may be like the cheap supermarket high octane, it's actually really, really good.
To be fair, that's what I used in the supercharged MX-5, purely because there wasn't really a Shell nearby to me, and that was the cheapest premium fuel around. Obviously, being supercharged actually got to use the benefit of the higher octane fuel. But this is the other thing: is you can go and dump up high octane fuel into your MX-5, and it'll make no difference because it's mapped for like octane of 85 in Africa or something, because they have to be mapped for the lowest octane in the country it's sold in.
Yeah, that's the difference. So my MX-5 was sold originally in Japan. The Stagia was sold originally in Japan, and in fact the Spike, I can tell a difference in the Spike between using 95 and 98. Like it's only a minor difference, but the butt dyno says that it's better fuel for the car.
It's minimal though. I've seen, like, I think Fifth Gear did a test a couple of years ago, and on a standard Golf it made barely any difference at all. They did a GTI Golf with, obviously it's got a turbo, so that made, like, I think it was like 10 horsepower or something daft like that. And then I think they tested a Scooby, it was more like 40 horsepower. It's hardly anything.
But what, 10 and a 40 horsepower difference?
On your basic car, that's nothing. Like on your NA powered standard EcoBox, it's a waste of money.
Yeah, but mate, to gain 10 and 40 horsepower in certain settings is...
Yeah, if you're driving around in a Subaru and you can gain 40 horsepower by putting different fuel in, you're going to do it.
Yeah, and it's probably one of the cheapest ways to gain an extra 40 horsepower in your Subaru as well.
There is that.
I know, I've seen Subaru forums before. The cheapest way of gaining 40 horsepower is just straight pipe everything. Yeah, you know, just all of the neighbours will hate you, but you'll have an extra 700 horsepower.
Don't forget buying a sticker from us and adding an extra 20 horsepower.
Oh yeah, you should definitely do that.
Just knee my desk and wobble the camera with a good plan.
It's fine, Matt. Don't worry. No one noticed. I think the reality is, you know, that's kind of, it's a thing. It's going to happen. If you don't want to replace everything, run premium. if you don't mind spending some money out and you want to keep your classic around a bit longer, convert it to electric.
I think saying that obviously
Well-
keeping you. Well, it was another. This is another point I wanted to make was, everyone's turning around. I've seen a lot of comments on Facebook, social media, and whatever, saying that why they're doing this, they shouldn't have to do this, blah 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 blah. And I bet people were having the same discussions and arguments when they brought in unleaded fuel over leaded fuel. It's no different. Move with the times.
Mm.
You're not at the end of the day. It doesn't matter how many petitions we sign. We're not going to change the government's mind.
No, it's not gonna. It's gonna happen regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes sense.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a headache, but ultimately, it's not.
Yeah, and so if your car was built after 2010, this won't affect you anyway. And the majority of cars on the road are built before after then anyway. I think Mazda's before 2006. I think up to 2006.
So I had a look at all the years, and I'm really unfortunate in this, in that if I wanted to run mine on Bogo, I couldn't. So the MX-5 isn't. The Stagia is like the year before Nissan did their engines, and the Spike is the year before the L15A became right as well.
Yeah. See, I've got the added bonus of I'm driving a diesel, so this doesn't affect me.
It will do when they ban diesels.
And speaking of diesels and segueing onto the next topic of car tax for the year, my diesel under the new tax bracket and what it is currently is £20 for the year.
I'm
for a 2.2 turbo. So all this about diesels are the worst for the environment is complete.
I'm living in a world right now where all but the Spike is registered as a before 2001 car. The MX-5 doesn't have a CO2 emission on its V5. Neither does the Stagia. So I'm hoping that they go down the route of it's got nothing on it, so it's up to 100 grams per kilogram and it's £0. I suspect they're going to assume it's over 255 and I'm paying 600 quid a car in road tax next year.
I think at a certain age they just go by just one flat bracket.
Yeah, well, that's so part of the problem with this. A lot of the confusion, I think, is that there is some text missing from the new tax brackets in the government budget. If you look at the new tax brackets and you're driving a high emissions car, like up to 255 grams per kilometre or whatever it is, it's £600, which almost doubles on what it used to be. However, a lot of cars used to be under what's called a Band K exemption. About halfway up the tax bands, they say if you're got a weird car or it's before 2006, we cap your emissions at this.
Yeah.
That's what it currently is. However, that text is missing from the new budget, but it's also missing from them referencing the old budget. So I'm hoping somebody's an idiot and just missed it off. It may be that they've gone, well, that's a bad idea. We should just charge them all lots of money. So fingers crossed, everybody. Hold on. Find out whether you're about to pay 600 quid or whether you're carrying on paying 255.
I think the worst one that I'm looking at here is, so for new cars, first year rate for anything over 255 is 2,245 quid, and it's 600 quid on the used car bendings. Like, so I that just cements for me that I'm still not buying any new cars.
Yeah, I mean, nothing new should be that bad unless it's like a supercar or something, in which case, yeah, fair enough.
Let's face it, Brent, that's the only new car that I'm buying, right?
Yeah, well, because like 255 grams CO2 per, I think it's per kilometre, it's pretty bad. It's really pretty bad. Like GS300s are around that level, and that is a very thirsty, very inefficient car.
I've just been looking over the government website where you've been chatting. There's a cars registered between 1st of March 2001 and 31st of March 2017. And there's a whole emissions bracket for everything. And then before 2001, which will be all our MX-5s and my RX-7, you have not over 1549cc and over 1549cc.
Yeah.
That's it. It's 165 or 270.
And halfway down that 2001 to 2017, there'll be a little asterisk next to band K, and there's some small print down the bottom. That small print is missing, and that's what's confusing people, I think.
So that little asterisk means includes cars with a CO2 figure over 225, but were registered before 23rd of March 2006.
Yeah.
I think the other interesting option is just don't pay your tax and run away from the police whenever you see them.
I actually had an MOT man tell me to do that, which was interesting.
What, just run from the police if you see them?
Well, I pointed out that when this engine goes in the car, my car won't have an MOT because it's not been running for ages. I don't particularly want to take it to an MOT station while I'm trying to run it in, and I can't tax it if it's got no MOT. And he just sort of went, I'd just not tax it or MOT it. I drove my car around for ages without, and I was like, okay, you're meant to be telling me to come to you to check my car's safe. Okay, guys.
That's not how it works, because what they do these days is ANPR camera you and then send you a bill.
Yeah. I mean, that works for me. Honestly, if I get ANPR'd and they send me a bill, that's fine. The problem is I do not want to go straight to an MOT centre on a fresh engine that needs some load on it and have it pootled around and then do the little brake rollers and then pootled around onto the brake checking. No. Let me drive my car fast for 4 days and then I'll have an MOT.
There's only one thing for it, Bryn. I've got some friends with a 4-wheel roller.
God, can you imagine how much that would cost?
About $2,000. So this is one of the things I've been doing with the RX-7 is the guys, I think it's Old Ones Racing, do a mapping and engine bedding in service. And it's $2,000 for mapping and engine bedding in. So they'll put obviously the various loads on, and because it's my first rotary and it's a brand new engine, I'm like, I'm going to let them do it. I think it's a sensible option, because if it decides it wants to explode or there's something weird going on, they can adjust it there and then.
Mm.
Especially with the rotary being as sensitive as it is.
Rotaries aren't sensitive, Matt.
They don't have a reputation.
They're like Toyota Hiluxes. They go on forever.
they do if they're regularly serviced. I'm building it myself in the garage, so yeah. That's the bit I'm worried about. It's my hands have been on it.
Some of the greatest engines in history were built in a shed. Just remember that.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, Nick's going to help me with it, and his RX-8 hasn't blown up yet. So
yeah, he did stupid things.
Yeah, I don't know how long ago did he build his engine? Like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
it's quite a while now, and it's not blown up yet. So I'm trusting in him to help me.
He's revving it to more than standard.
Yeah, I'm not. I think I've got a reference book somewhere. I don't know where it got packed into, but it says without balancing, I think 7,500 is about the limit you should take it to.
Pathetic.
Yeah.
So I think car taxes, fuel change, it's all kind of stuff that the government's going to do to us. But the reality is all of that is actually aimed at getting us to buy newer cars.
I don't want a newer car.
I know, Bryn, and we're gonna talk about something else that me and Bryn have actually chatted about a little bit earlier this week, which is around planned obsolescence and a very interesting rule that, despite leaving the EU, we're keeping, which is the right to repair laws that are coming in. Now, they're aimed predominantly at consumer goods, but they could have very interesting connotations for the classic car community.
Well, I don't know if there's a time limit on right to repair, which means it's not relevant for cars. But there is already, weirdly, the car industry is already kind of one up on the consumer industry, in that manufacturers do have to produce spare parts, and they have to produce spare parts for a certain amount of time. I think it's like 10 years or something. They have to produce spares, but Now, consumer goods are also affected by the laws that says, if somebody buys your stuff, they have to be able to repair it.
It's an interesting point you bring up about cars and getting spare parts and stuff, because Mazda recently announced they're reproducing parts for the FD and they're reproducing parts for the NA MX-5. So you can go and buy brand new parts for both of those cars, where they stopped doing them and then introduced it again.
Weirdly, though, have you read the list of some of the bits that they're producing, Matt? There's some stuff that you can't get hold of that it would have been really great if they remade. And then there's some stuff on the list and go, I've never seen anybody ask for one of those ever. Why are we remaking the door handle on the inner side? Like, nobody's ever needed a spare door handle on the inside.
Yeah, they have, because there's a load of drifters that have taken the door cards out and just chucked those handles in the bin, mate.
I think it's more around the restoration thing, because I know in Japan they offer a restoration service. So you take your NA MX-5 to Mazda in Japan, give them what is probably an extortionate amount of money, and they will nut and bolt restore it from the ground up to a showroom fresh, and they give it you back.
Do you know what? I think we should investigate how much that would cost with my MX-5, but tell them, do not touch my engine.
It'll be an extortionate amount of money. Either way, and that's off topic to right to repair anyway.
No, it's not necessarily. It's this concept that we should be allowed to repair the stuff we buy rather than the parts costing as much as the thing itself.
But this is one thing I brought up when Bryn posted the news story on Facebook. Is the whole reason stuff like Torx bolts exist is because manufacturers were trying to make it hard for you to repair stuff. So you take it back to the dealership so that they had all the right tools and the fancy tools and all this sort of stuff. I've seen it on videos I've watched online where to do certain things on certain cars, you have to buy one very specific tool that only does one job on one make of car.
So here's a fun thing, right? So I'm working on a new product for Violent Running at the moment, which lives inside of this here case. Right? But this case is held together by one screw. That screw, Nintendo have that little 3-pointed screw they use in things, and it's really small. Yeah. So this is a bigger version of that screw. Can I find a screwdriver to fit it? No. Luckily, the tip of the tiny screwdriver I have just manages to bite and turn.
So I don't know whether the camera will pick this up. Are you gonna focus?
It's not.
There you go.
Oh, wow.
Look at
That's
that.
another Nintendo special, isn't it?
Yeah, that is Super Mario 64. Just happens to be what I had behind me, and it's like a bolt, but it's got like pins on it, kind of like a locking wheel nut. And obviously, they didn't want you to take apart the game cartridge. See, that's a different issue altogether. That's them trying to stop you from copying their game cartridges. But you take apart an iPhone, for example. There's not even screws on the back of this. I wouldn't even know where to start taking that apart.
I would, with a pry bar.
Yeah, obviously a hammer will do it, but I wouldn't even know where to start because it's the only gap. So this aluminium piece is all one piece all the way around there to the front. I imagine you have to pry the screen off in some way, shape, or form, which will probably involve breaking it. Actually, no. There's a really, really tiny screw in the bottom there.
The fundamental point is you can look at things like VW. The ODB2 port is universal. The software you need to actually interact with that is not.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things that manufacturers will do is at some point somewhere somebody has said, right, we need to universally use OBD2. And everyone's gone, yeah, okay, that's fine. And then what they've done is they go, okay, we'll get around that and make you buy our software.
But, I mean, none of that is actually what Right to Repair is trying to stop. It's not about you personally at home being able to repair something, although it will help you with that. It is about they have to make spare parts and things have to be repairable, because computers and phones, quite often you will take your phone to a phone shop and they'll repair it for you, but you get outside of that and it's not a thing. If your lawnmower stops working, there's not a lawnmower dealership around the corner that you can go to.
I think you'll find that's because you live relatively near civilization, Bryn. There is, in fact, a lawnmower dealership that I could take my lawnmower to get it repaired near me.
But that's the point. That is the point. Is like random bits and bobs, things like your kettle and your cooker and things like that. Generally, if they break down and you call somebody out, maybe they can get hold of the parts, maybe they can't, and they're usually very expensive when you try and buy these bits. So the right to repair is about combating the consumerism of you can't actually repair it because the manufacturer don't want you to. They want you to buy a new one. They don't make spare parts and distribute them. And so we're throwing things away. And right to repair, really, it's an environmental law. It's about actually clipping this, buying new products when they break, and making a repair culture. And that sounds like you're stifling the original manufacturers. They're not going to make the profit because they're not selling the new ones anymore, which kind of isn't true, because if they think about it, they will make money from repairing things instead. If you spend 600 quid on a new washing machine, or you spend 400 quid repairing your washing machine for the next 10 years,
it's a good point though, because if you take your phone to a phone shop to have your screen replaced, odds are they're using third-party screens because they can't buy the screens from the manufacturer. You take your iPhone to a shop to get it replaced, not a chance they're using a genuine Apple screen, because Apple don't sell the screens. And that's the point of this law, is to force Apple to sell the screens at a reasonable price so it's affordable to replace the screens. How many people out there have got a smashed phone screen right now? And they'll have one because they can't afford, or they can't go and buy another screen to replace it.
Man's good.
I genuinely don't know how people smash phone screens, because
I think all
volleyed the phone off the floor before and not broken at the screen.
Yeah, I've in fact in all my years of owning phones, I've broken 2 screens.
But
one was skateboarding because I left it in my pocket and fell on it. That was a stupid thing to do, and that was back when sliding phones existed, and it still works. I had one that fell, literally the middle button, scroll button, fell out, and it still worked. And then the other one was my old Galaxy S7. I think I dropped it on a corner, and then it had a tiny crack in it that you couldn't even see.
But the thing is, the actual reason we bring this topic up isn't so we can have a chat about how you're going to be able to fix your kettle. It brought up that concept of sustainability within the market and what consumerism's actually doing to the way we use cars. So the really interesting sort of shot of this is, what does it mean for repairing vehicles? What does it mean for the access to those parts and the price of those parts? Because some parts can be prohibitively expensive. But when you look at things, actually that disposable nature of your kettle has crept into the automotive industry, in the fact that, you get finance deals, PCP, the car goes back after 3 years, you get a new car.
I think the way that it's going to affect the cars, or the right to repair cars, more than anything, is buying individual parts for a part, if that makes sense. So if you have your throttle body assembly, for example, you could go and buy another throttle body assembly, but you can't buy any of the individual pieces from the throttle body assembly itself. So you take apart a throttle body, it's probably made up of 10 or 20 pieces, but you can't buy any of those pieces on their own. You have to buy a whole new assembly. And I think that's where it's going to come in.
Yeah.
And I've seen people, and I've done it myself, where I've taken two different parts that are broken in different ways, taken them both apart, made one part good out of the two. And if you need one spring for your throttle body, you can't go and buy that from your dealership.
Yeah.
And I think that might be something that creeps in. It needs to creep in.
That's the hope. That's the thing. It needs to. Manufacturers will probably resist that because they don't want it. But realistically, you need to do that. In terms of the car industry specifically, the example that I always give to people is something like a modern Fiat 500. Okay, and I'm name dropping that car because it is shocking. I know quite a few people who've had them, and they go into sort of their 5th, 6th year, and they fail on terminal rust on the chassis rails. And if you get under one, the reason is the chassis rail is a U section that has no drains and is open at the top, and any water that gets splashed in can just get into it. Now, the skeptic among you may say that is actually by design because they want the car to rust away so that you have to buy a new one. I think it's just like gross negligence. But that's happening more and more. The quality of these things has gone down hand in hand with the idea that you replace them often.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is if you want a car that just keeps going, stuff from the late 90s and the noughties where they'd worked out how to make things really good but hadn't quite got into the idea of consumerism yet. Those cars just keep going because they're so over-engineered.
Yeah,
like they don't make the manufacturers profit anymore. That is what you should be doing because it takes less resources, less energy, and less environmental damage to make something that keeps going. And what you want to do as a manufacturer, your moral obligation is to stop the throwaway culture. And so you need to kind of try and be the place that you get parts from. There's all these little companies that make spare parts for old cars. If you're the original manufacturer, you want to be getting in on that and trying to make a little bit of profit. Yeah. Obviously, that's not going to happen because they still just want to sell you new cars.
If I could go and buy, so just thinking about the rust issues, right, with the Nissan, okay? Nobody makes a replacement rear wing section for my rusty arch, so we're going to fix that ourselves. And very recently, someone started producing the strut tops themselves, but Nissan don't sell you that part, and that is stupid. Some of the bits on the stage are just stupid design, like let's jam a bit of foam in a bit that water can get to, and just leave it there. That's the wing mirror door rust that happens on a stage, yeah. And actually, the reason that the strut tops go is there's this little prong of metal that hangs down like a hook underneath in the wheel well, and that gets wet, and it's that rusts, and then the rust goes up and travels up to the thing.
I think the thing with the Stager though is it's a pretty rare car. Let's be honest. Yeah. Even in Japan, it's not overly common. So it's not like hundreds and thousands of people are making them.
I'm not at all suggesting that the right to repair is going to help me fix my Stager.
No.
But talking of rust on cars and what Bryn said, I think either Bryn's right and it is gross negligence.
Bryn is right a lot of the time.
I'm willing to accept that Bryn might be right on this. Or the other option is, actually, you get to 6 years out and you're way out of PCP, you're way out of finance terms, and they're just going, well, where's our next shot of regular payments coming from? And that, if that is the case, that's just poor behaviour. The fact that it is more environmentally friendly for me to go and buy a Series 3 Land Rover and poodle around in that than it is to buy a Tesla is a really, really telling thing.
I think part of the problem is the country that the car comes from. So you buy a Japanese car in Japan and they don't bother undersealing it or anything like that because they don't salt their roads.
Yep.
And I think part of the problem that we have in the UK specifically in terms of rust and cars rusting and all of that is because we salt our roads. If we didn't salt our roads, our cars just wouldn't rust. Apart from living on the coast where there's salty sea air and all that sort of stuff. But like you look at Chris's 370Z, if you've seen his videos, you've seen how rusty that is underneath. If that poodled around in Japan for all of its life and then come over here, it would be immaculate. You look at any fresh import from Japan, and there's no rust on it because they don't salt their roads. And I think part of our rusty car problem is because it's come from a road that's got salt on it.
So I think the answer there, Boris Johnson, if by any minor miracle you're watching, is stop salting our roads.
But that doesn't answer the Fiat issue. But the whole water getting into the chassis legs and stuff like that, I think is an oversight on Fiat's part, because you look at, and we use the AMXR as an example, the drain holes in the Mark 1, the chassis legs on the Mark 2 are both good examples. They did this double skin thing on the chassis legs on the Mark 2 to give it strength, and that's what they had to do to make the thing. But little were they to know in 10 years' time that the water would get in and see and then rust them from the inside out. The more concerning thing for me on Mazdas where they rust is on the Mark 2 Mazda 6, where they rust in such a way that after a set amount of time, the steering rack comes off.
Yeah, that's bad.
You try and steer, and the whole where the mounts are for the steering rack, they rust and just snap, and the whole rack comes off.
But see, like some stuff like that, you can forgive things that they've sort of missed, and stuff like the MX-5, where they're now 25 years old. They're rusty because they're 25 years old. My Passat has got rust bubbles coming up in the arches, and you look up why, and it's the same thing. They put foam in for sound deadening. You go, oh, that's awful. It still lasted like 15 years before this became a problem. For a car to get rusty within 5 years, it's because it's poor design and they've just not bothered to try and stop it. One of Will's old Peugeots failed its MOT at 6 years old because the suspension mount, the steering, the thing, the clicky, save you in a crashy seatbelt mounting point rusted through on a 6-year-old car because it just didn't underseal it. And that's not an import. That's a UK model.
Yeah, I think what's unforgivable is any car rusting that badly within 10 years.
Yeah.
That's complete. Like 11 years and onwards, fair enough. You've had the car 10 years.
10 years and 1 day, and Matt's all right with it.
Yeah. But yeah, you have to think, if you drive a car 10,000 miles a year, you're going to do 100,000 miles in 10 years. Yeah. And that's usually where you start seeing uneconomical repairs because you spend so much on parts for a car that's just not worth anything. There is a line you do have to draw when it becomes uneconomical to repair. My old Mazda 6 was a good example. It needed brakes all round his CD joint. It was starting to rust on the arches. I think it was leaking in the boot. And you just draw the line and that's it. It's had enough, scrap it and start again with something else. But on a car that's 6 years old to a point where the seatbelt mount is failing because it's rusty, there's no excuse for that.
I mean, that then becomes a safety concern. What I'd be really interested in looking at is, in the States, quite a lot of the states have got lemon laws. So if something happens within the first year and then it proceeds to happen X number of times, then basically the manufacturer has no choice but to buy the car back.
Well, this is how we end up with safety recalls, and to a point where you still get them on. Nicole's had a few on her 2010 Mazda 2, and that's 10 years old, and they're still recalling it. And Mazda are good for that. They've been recalling RX-8s quite recently on airbags and stuff like that, because it's obviously a safety concern.
Oh, yeah, the shotgun in the face will definitely kill you if you have an accident. Airbags are a classic.
Yeah, that one. Because I think the Mazda 2, some of the older Mazda 6s, and the RX-8s all went in for recalls on airbags. But you don't see recalls on kettles that often.
Really, really interestingly, the UK's lemon law is 30 days after purchase.
Yeah.
That's not enough.
So the full refund applies on the car for 30 days after purchase. And that's the thing. So this stuff is capable of going on for a lot longer than people seem to think. And I know I started seeing it actually, and this gets onto the title of the episode with what's going on in the UK. Right, is I've been at a meet and someone's genuinely turned around and gone, That's not cool. Look how old it is. At the Stadia. And I was just and I was literally sat there like, you have no idea what that is. And then I saw them yeah. And then I saw them wander off into a well-known leased car. I'm not going to do a Milton.
Yeah.
It was one of those ones that we just always know there's a chance that's leased. Least of 75% chance it's leased as well. And it's that attitude of it's not new enough, therefore it's not good. Where actually, give me an old rusty 90s Jap wagon over something shiny and new all day long, and I'll keep that thing going, and that's my way of saving the environment.
I think this kind of applies to that. We've got into this mindset with phone culture as well. Like everybody has to have the newest phone with the newest tech, and you'll replace it every 2 years. But why? Where I think it made sense.
That actually is planned obsolescence. So that's because a lot of phone companies, Google are actually really bad for it. Google will only provide support for, I think it's 3 years after the release of the handset. So you need to upgrade. If you're pretty much on launch day, most people aren't going to be in a place to get that phone. You hope after 12 months your phone's still supported by the time you get your contract 12 months later. But then after 3 years, you need to upgrade your phone if you want security updates. And given the fact that, we keep card details on Apple Pay and Google Wallet these days, I want those security updates.
I think this is going to apply to the whole sort of consumer culture as a whole, and I think it's come from mobile phones and technology. If you go all the way back to the start of the century, so year 2000, we were still using CRT monitors and cameras with film in them and CDs. That's where we were 20 years ago.
Where we were 20 years ago, Matt, is all panicking that the clock couldn't tick over past the year 1999.
Yeah. But beside that, you look at the progress of technology in the last 20 years. It's come a long way.
Still not gone back to the moon, though, have we?
Not yet. Assuming we went there in the first place.
That's a brave thing to say around the engineer.
Of course we went. People are stupid. You look at the technology leap, and my point is, go back 10 years, 15 years, the middle, like 2005. Every year you look at each phone, and it's a massive leap. So you had a phone contract that lasted a year or two, and in 2 years, your old 2-year-old phone looks like a brick compared to the most modern phone.
Yeah.
And that leap is probably where this consumerism came from.
Yeah.
In terms of the world of phones and cars, and technology came a long way in a very short amount of time. But you look at your 2-year-old phone now and compare it to a brand new one or one that was 2 years old, either way, there's not a lot of difference, is there?
Hang on. Let's play a genuine game of spot the difference. Right? So, which one of these two phones, right? Just let me lock the screen so no one can see anything. Which one of these two phones is my current Google Pixel?
The one on the right. Or it might not be your right. The one under Boom.
This one.
That's an iPhone.
It's not an iPhone, that's a Google Pixel.
Is it? No, they've got the same square camera then.
So what makes you think, Brain, that the one under Boom is the newer one?
It looks less
I would say that the one under that particular Google Pixel is because it's got more cameras in the back.
It is the only difference, right, is the cameras in the back and the thumbprint thing's gone. And it's back. That thumbprint, I could go out with that tomorrow, right, and blag that that's a Pixel 5 if no one saw the camera, because they brought the thumbprint reader back on the Pixel 5.
Yeah. But that's my point.
The radar in the phone on the Pixel 4 that was doing the face reading stuff.
like Nicole was looking at changing her phone, and she was looking at the latest. I think it was OnePlus, and she was going through the spec list, and the RAM and the internal storage are all the same as what I've got now. It's got the same number of cameras in it, which is 4, which is excessive. Like one of them had, somebody pointed out a new phone had a optical zoom of, I think it was 32 times. Try freehand holding a phone on 32 times zoom. You can't, because it moves too much.
I think actually, getting back onto cars and things, one of the other things that's quite...
Get back into cars. I just want to say, you're right, and I hadn't thought about that before, that actually the consumerism potentially comes from, that leap of technology was so much that you needed the new thing to stay relevant. And now that that's stopped,
it's stagnated.
Will it go away, or has the consumer culture now taken hold? And hopefully the answer is no.
I'm hoping it goes away and we start repairing stuff. We go back to repairing stuff.
So actually, I think getting back onto cars, the interesting thing about that is, for me, is as someone who's shot video on really, really old cine-reel stuff, right? Because I'm ancient and I went through a real hipster phase with my videography at one point.
But you were still only doing that not that long ago.
No, I wasn't doing it that long ago. I was at uni when I was doing that. So it was maybe, what?
Start of the 2000s.
12 years ago?
Yeah, mid-2000s.
I can now, with this thing in my pocket, make a video that I would be comfortable uploading to YouTube after a little bit of editing and a little bit of colour grading.
Which you can edit and colour grade on.
Yep. On my phone. Upload it to YouTube. There is, like, I've just been debating what to do with the camera kit this year, and I've decided to buy more of what I've got so that I can get other members of the team to help me film at events instead of spending a load of money on cameras, because I can fix everything in post now. The camera quality on a mobile phone is that good that we have put videos up on the YouTube channel that are filmed on mobile phones and people just don't know.
And the other thing to point out with that is it's all well and good. So we're getting on to a point of, I think, 8 or 12K or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
And I bet, I know Bryn hasn't got a lot of, call it up to date or brand new or whatever you want to call it. I bet you've got nothing in your house that can display in 4K.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, this phone does Ultra HD, whatever that is, and sometimes an app will turn that on, and then I'll immediately turn it back off because I'm like, well, I don't need to see that kind of detail.
But that's my point. We could go out.
When you go past 8K, right? It's essentially 8K is basically 33 megapixels. The human eye sees in 40 megapixels. So you go to 12K, right? You buy something in 12K, and I'm sorry, but you've just fallen for a gimmick.
Yeah, this is my point. So you can go out and we can buy 12K cameras and all the rest of it, and we can film in 12K. But my computer monitors are 1080p, and my phone is 4K, and that's where my limit. So recording anything over 4K is a waste, because the majority of people probably aren't watching on the most up-to-date screen.
But I think that says, that brings us back around to this element of consumerism that's entered the car community, is that we should probably go back and look at what we can use for what a little bit more. People turn around and saying an MX-5 shouldn't be worth $8,000. I'm sorry, but it should, because it'll run on forever. And it's for mine.
As long as you change the fuel lines.
As a limited edition.
Nah, nothing should ever be worth that much.
But I think it's a good thing to bring up, though, because old car culture, you made your own out of what you had in the garage.
Yep.
Go back to the Max Power era. You made your own thing. You didn't go and buy the same wheels that everybody else has got or the same suspension that everybody else has got. You made your own thing and you did your own thing. And then if it went wrong, you repaired it yourself.
I hate to break it to you, Matt, but we didn't build our own suspension. We still bought that.
Do you know what I mean? Not everybody was on air ride and everybody was on the same set of wheels. And
But we'll do.
you went and did your own thing.
They did make their own body kits and really, really shouldn't have done. Oh
Yes.
my God.
Right. I am actually going to just stick a flag in the ground here and say we're going to do an episode on this probably in a few weeks. And me and Bryn are going to fall out during that episode. Right? I think the reality is Matt, before you go too far down the Max Power era... Right,
yeah, that's that
is a whole nother episode that we should probably do. And it might be a discussion for next week if Milton's back, actually.
But my point still stands is when you're building a max power car in that era, you didn't go and consume stuff and buy it off the shelf. You made your own.
Yeah. And
that's my point. It wasn't consumerism because you built your own. And
if I get an excuse to build my own stuff, I love doing that still.
Oh, yeah. Your light show behind you.
And getting back onto right to repair, that is infinitely easy to do when you can buy the individual parts out of another car's stuff to cobble something together. That's how I put the inside of an Alfa Romeo into a Fiat Punto.
That's a good point, though. Making your own stuff is right to repair. So what's happening, we're in this culture now where, for example, 3D printers, you can buy them as low as £100. The quality's not great, but you spend between £100 and £200 and you've got a decent 3D printer. So what's happening is you can't go and buy this small plastic part for your curtain rail because they don't sell it. So what you do is you sit on a piece of software or somebody's already made it and put it on Thingiverse, download it and print your own.
Yeah.
And there are people out there that have made full businesses selling these little tiny plastic parts that the manufacturer doesn't make. They've designed and sold their own.
That's the hope of where all of this will go. The right to repair thing for me is not necessarily about you being able to get the manufacturer to replace your stuff, but I'm thinking you'll probably see repair shops start to open up back again.
Yeah.
You don't really see them anymore unless you live in the city, but it's probably going to be the place that if you have a broken thing, you take it to the repair shop near you, and that person is the kind of person who will work out how to fix it or work out what's wrong and buy the bits. It's going to be like that. And now with 3D printing, that person can probably help you out with that as well. Or I've got this weird obscure thing that's broken. They'll measure it up and they'll make you a replacement bit.
And actually, those kind of people are the kind of people that make some of the best car builders because they'll figure out how to do what they want to do, and they're not a qualified engineer like Bryn. They're the home engineer that goes, yeah, that's about right, and that'll work. Like, it doesn't have to be as precise as it has to be for Bryn, but it'll work. And I think that's actually a really good note to start wrapping up the episode. So what we have discussed this week is if you want to avoid tax changes, the answer is still Mark 1 MX-5. If you want to avoid sticking E10 in your Mark 1 MX-5 and damaging the engine, just go to Tesco and fill up with momentum. And the right for repair is hopefully going to bring back the days of the Max Power era, and we're all going to be making our own body kits again.
Can I make a caveat? I think we should revisit this topic in exactly 12 months' time.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Even if it's just a short segment, we'll just revisit some of these things and see how things have gone.
Yeah, I'm down with that. So we will revisit this in 12 months' time, and we'll see how much I remembered of doing this episode in 12 months' time, because if I've remembered that and you're watching this in 12 months' time, the link to the new video is in the description.
Set a reminder on your phone that you will have in a year's time because you're not a nonce.
I mean, I'm upgrading.
You'll still have the same phone.
As soon as I can get my upgrade, I'm upgrading. Because I miss the thumbprint, the fingerprint reader on the back of the phone.
Look at this guy! He's buying into the lie!
I didn't know how much I'd miss it on this phone, right? Until I got rid of this phone. Anyway, this week, I've been Bam. That's been Matt. He's been Bren. Don't forget, all the links that we normally put are in the description. Are there links to the playlist for the podcast. this has been one of a sort of a hodgepodge episode because we had a few little topics we wanted to talk about. We will see you all next week for one of those episodes where we do a big bite on something. Let us know in the description what you want us to talk about. Like, comment, subscribe. Subscribers to the 202 of you that got us past our first 200 subscriber goal that we wanted to get to. The next goal is 1,000. So just hit the button and the bell and come watch us chat stuff every week. There's going to be a couple of unboxing videos coming up. I'm waiting for one parcel to arrive before I film those. And it's been great having you all join us for another episode. We'll catch you next week. Bye-bye!
Bye! When do I have to do the pants burnout?